Welcome back, troops. Let's tab 59. So if you're a soldier on operations and on stag and you fell asleep on stag, on operations mind, what's going to happen to you? Well, you're probably going to get nicked for it. You're probably going to get charged. If you had a dirty rifle and you got picked up for it on operations and you argued with the officer that picked you up for it and you kicked him in the shins, you'd definitely get done for that, wouldn't you? If you had PTSD on operations, which many soldiers did, you'd get treated, you'd get put in hospital. But those kinds of incidences in World War I meant you were going to be court-martialed, potentially sentenced to death and shot at dawn. And that's what I want to talk about. 306 British soldiers. I think there was a Navy guy amongst it actually. I think there's a Royal Navy officer amongst it. But 306 British Forces personnel were executed by being shot at dawn during World War I. Interestingly, New Zealand was the only Commonwealth forces that didn't shoot anybody. They refused to use the death penalty in war. The Germans on the other side, well, their total shot at dawn, or shot by firing squad executions in World War I, totaled 25 men. But the British forces, 306. The incident I said about a dirty rifle, there was a soldier that was on parade on the front line, parade on the front line, but on operations on the front line, probably just to the rear, having his rifle inspected as they did. The officer picked him up for a dirty rifle, had to go at him, laid into him, and the soldier kicked the officer in the shin. He was court-martialed and shot at dawn. A soldier, had his forage cap, so wear those brown sort of peak forage caps when they weren't wearing their steel helmet. So again, probably just off the front line maybe. Refused to put his hat on. He was told to put it on, he said, I can't. He said, it's soaking wet, I'm not going to put it on. He refused that, to put his hat on. He was court-martialed and shot at dawn. They got him because to be shot at dawn, it wasn't just cowardice or desertion. Falling asleep at your post, like I say, that would get you shot. Assaulting an officer or striking an officer, that could get you shot. And disobeying a lawful command. So in the case of the guy with a wet forage cap, refused to put it on, it's a lawful command, he refused it, court-martialed him and shot him. Now, if you had PTSD on a modern day operation, let's say out in Afghanistan, back then when it was on in Iraq, and obviously other places, you got PTSD, or what they call then shell shock, you get withdrawn off the front line and treated immediately. It wasn't looked on as cowardice. So what we're saying is in the First World War, if you had shell shock, you were a coward because you refused to go forward. But that's not quite right, because there's at least one case where a soldier was suffering from shell shock and he was put in hospital for 5 months. 5 months in hospital being treated for shell shock. When they deemed him fit again, they sent him back up the front line. And when he got up there, he heard the sound of the guns, and that was enough to tip him over the edge, and he went back into shell shock, wouldn't go forward, dragging and screaming, didn't want to know, court-martialed him and shot him. 306 men. A lot of it was post-traumatic stress disorder, or as they called it, shell shock, but they still shot you for it, even though they recognised you had shell shock. It's quite barbaric. Now, after the war, in 1930, after World War I, the Great War, in 1930, the Ministry of the War Office then, government if you like, they decided there would never be any more executions in the British Army. And when World War II happened, 1939 and 45, there was no British Forces personnel shot for cowardice or mutiny or desertion or kicking an officer because you got a dirty rifle or refusing to put your hat on because it was wet. They all stopped. What did they gain? Now, my grandfather, what did they gain in the First World War from shooting people? Well, obviously the idea was that once they made an example of a few people for these laws, breaking these military codes, cowardice, or whatever you want to call it, striking an officer, once they made those potentially a sentence of death, the idea is to scare everybody else to see an example of it, and they wouldn't do it. But my grandfather was a World War I veteran, and he lived till I was 13, and he told me many stories. He never took part in the firing squad, he never witnessed, but he knew people. When he was on the front, he knew someone that had got shell shock. In fact, he was wounded at the same time. My grandfather was at the aid post with a shrapnel wound to his leg, and a couple of beds down from him was a lad suffering from shell shock. And grandfather went away for some treatment, whatever, came back to his hospital bed, if you like, in the field hospital, and the guy with shell shock had gone. And when he asked one of the orderlies what had happened to him, he said he'd been taken away, he's going on court-martial, and they shot him the next morning. Horrendous, absolutely horrendous. So, a few examples. Now, the firing squad itself, bad enough being shot at dawn for someone like that, but the next thing, being part of the firing squad. So what I used to do was always make sure the firing squad come from the accused, the prisoner's own unit. Obviously to hit home, this is what could happen to you. And they would pick up to 12 men. There'd be one officer, so there'd be 14 men. There'd be one officer, one sergeant, and 12 men. The 12 men being the actual firing squad. They would be taken out and their rifles would be laid down on the ground, and they'd be dressed away so they couldn't see their firearms, their rifles. The officer then would load each rifle, but he would put, I think it was 2 or 3 blank rounds in some of the rifles, and then mix the rifles up. So obviously when the men come back down, they're dressed behind what they thought was their weapon. It wasn't, and they didn't know what was loaded in it. They didn't know if it was a live round or a blank. And then the accused could either be shot standing up tied to a post, or seated on a chair, tied, hands tied behind his back. A little white patch put over his heart, and then ready, aim, fire. Blindfold offered and all that, and he was shot. And then they'd go over to check to see if he's still alive, and if he was, the officer would dispatch him with his service revolver. The impact on those guys, the officer has to go up, and if he hasn't been shot, if he's been shot but he's not dead, the prisoner that is, the officer then got to draw his service revolver and finish him off. I'd love to know what the impact was on these people on the firing squad. I tried to look for stuff, I couldn't see much of it. Now, you veterans will know, when you fire your rifle, whatever weapon you had, when you fired it, you know there's a difference between firing a blank round and a live round. Because a blank round normally has less cowardice, less gunpowder in it, so you get less of a kick, and it does sound a bit different. But I wonder if those guys, when they fired, knew they'd fired a blank round or a live round, because you're pretty much all fired at the same time. You're going to be hyped up, you're going to be, I'd imagine, I'm only imagining this, if you're a member of the firing squad, it's one of your own. You may even know him, I don't know if anyone actually shot someone they knew, but certainly from your regiment, your cat battery, that's pretty horrendous. So what was the impact on those guys? That must have been something else. So say in 1930 it was binned, and World War II there was no more executions like that. It finished, thankfully. So that's what I wanted to talk about. Not a great subject. Interestingly, again, just recently, I believe in the last week or so, a firing squad, a sentence of death was carried out in the United States. Not military, it's a civilian convict, was executed by firing squad. They've brought that back. I think it's been always a backup if they can't get the lethal injection chemicals. I haven't read up on this, so I'm just snatching this out there, but yeah, what a way to die. I think a lot as well on the firing squad, you know, some of the guys may have been really quite upset and shaking when they're taking aim. I'm not sure the distance from the firing squad to the guy they're shooting, to the prisoner. I'm not sure the distance. I don't think it was very far, but even so, you're het up, you're nervous, maybe you pulled wide and didn't hit the white part. You might have missed him altogether, you might have clipped him in the shoulder, and that's why, I mean, 12 men firing, that's a lot of rounds. Well, all right, there's a few blank rounds amongst it, but still a lot of ammo coming down your way at a short distance. But to survive that amount of rounds, 303 round we're talking about, it tells me that some of the guys must have just shot wide of the mark, or, I don't know, nerves, refused to shoot at him. Of course, the guy then is only wounded maybe, and he's got to be finished off with the officer's revolver. Incredible. So, I'd like to know your thoughts on that. Shot at dawn. And of course, the other thing was that for years, people started to petition the government to give them a pardon. And I believe it was in 1993, John Major was the Prime Minister, the Conservative government in the UK, and it was brought to the House of Commons and debated, and he refused to give them a pardon. That was in 1993. However, in 2006, the Labour government at the time, they decided to give a pardon to the 306 men. And if you ever go up to our National Arboretum in the Midlands of the United Kingdom, great place to visit. I'm going up to do some videos. Up there, I've been up there a few times, and up there is a separate memorial for the people that were shot at dawn. And there's a post in the ground, like a firing squad post if you like. You can look it up online. And on each of these posts is a plaque giving the details of the soldier that was executed. His name, rank, date, age maybe, I can't remember. Because some of these guys were 16 years old that was shot as well. Lied about their age and shot. 306 lives. And of course, the families back home would receive no compensation, no war pension for their loved one being killed, because they were a criminal in those eyes and they were shot at dawn. So there was no financial support, which left many families destitute. If you can imagine a young soldier, maybe he's married and he's maybe got 1 or 2 children, and he's working away in whatever trade he had in the UK, in his, he's got a little house somewhere, and he's called out to fight out in France or wherever. He goes out there, does a misdemeanor, does something wrong, gets court-martialed, and then shot at dawn. That's the livelihood for that family. Remember, there's no welfare state then. No, destitute, off to the workhouse. That's it. And of course, the other thing was, you know, so many people were getting notified their loved ones had been killed in action, missing in action, out in France or wherever it was. And then, of course, the ones that were shot at dawn, they receive a telegram. I mean, no one come and knock the door. There's no padre knocking on the door telling them. They get a telegram through the post. Husband is shot for cowardice, shot at dawn, died on this date. Finished. It put many families out on the street. I'll say they got their pardon in 2006, which is something, I suppose. But it must have affected a lot of families. And I'm imagining, you know, I had grandfathers in World War I, so I imagine there's still many people alive that have heard the stories of a family member that was executed and shot at dawn. And there's a lot of stigma to it. Back then, there's a lot of stigma. People hid it away from the public. They didn't say that their husband or their brother or father or whatever had been shot at dawn for cowardice or some other offence. They kept it quiet. Horrendous. Thankfully, those days are long gone. Certainly for the British Army anyway. We'll never see that sort of thing again. It'd be horrendous. I fell asleep many a times on stag. Not on operations though. But anyway. So I'd be interested in your thoughts, and especially if there's anyone out there that is watching this and has had or knows that they had a family member from the First World War that was indeed shot at dawn. I'd be interested to know. So, cracking day. Some more videos coming up, so please stay tuned. And the t-shirts, the Let's Tab 59 t-shirts are back from the manufacturers, the printers, whatever you call it. Trace around picked them up today. So the Let's Tab 59 t-shirts are back. There's a few more bits with the PayPal we've got to sort out, etc. And when that's done, we'll make a video, show you the t-shirts and give you all the details of how you can buy a Let's Tab 59 t-shirt if you like. That's the sort of thing you want to do. They're not too expensive either. Kept the price down just to cover the postage and packaging, just so we break even. So anyway, if you're new to my channel and you haven't subscribed, please consider it. And I'm not saying do it, I'm saying consider it. Stay safe everybody, until next time, Let's Tab.